Hello and welcome to Byju's Exam Prep IAS. Let's get started and look into our daily quiz. Let's look into the first question. Consider the following statements with respect to koalas. It is an arboreal herbivorous marsupial native to Australia. Its IUCN status is critically endangered. Koalas are mostly nocturnal. Which of the above statements are incorrect? Since it is asking for the incorrect statement, the answer to this is 2 only. Why have we taken this practice question? Because this article on the Indian Express makes a reference to koalas. Let us try and understand what are these options. When it comes to the first option, the koalas are native to Australia. This is a right statement, and this happens to be an arboreal animal. Basically, arboreal animals are those animals that live on the trees. So this is an arboreal herbivorous marsupial which is native to Australia. So the first statement is right. When we look into the third statement, yes, koalas are mostly nocturnal, which means they are awake at night, they sleep during the day, and when it comes to the dietary habits, they feed on the leaves of the eucalyptus. Because of the low nutritional value, they have become nocturnal and they sleep during the day period and are awake during the night period. So the third statement is also right, and the IUCN status is not critically endangered, but instead it is vulnerable. Since it is vulnerable and the question is asking for the incorrect statement, the answer to this would be 2 only. So this article currently goes on to say that there are a lot of threats that are being faced by this particular species. What is happening? The koala population has faced widespread habitat loss because of the bushfires, because of the urbanization, because of the construction of the urban settlements, and also due to activities of agriculture. This has led to loss of the habitat, and as a result, this has become a major threat to the koalas. Another major threat to this particular species happens to be chlamydia. What is chlamydia? This happens to be a sexually transmitted disease. Because of this disease, it also causes blindness and cysts in the koala's reproductive tract. So on one side, the human intervention in the form of urban development, in the form of agriculture, in the form of destroying of their habitat has led to threats to these species. Another happens to be the sexually transmitted disease, which is a major form of threat to these species, which is why Australia has listed koalas as endangered species, but the IUCN status still remains to be vulnerable is what we have to understand from this article. Where are they present? They are present in the Queensland as well as New South Wales in Victoria. So the areas where these species are present is on the eastern side of Australia. Now let's look into the next practice question. With respect to index of industrial production, which of the following statements are correct? It is calculated and published by the Central Statistical Organization every 3 months. The CSO has revised the base year of the IIP from 2012 to 2016. Which of the statements are correct? The answer to this is none. Why have we taken this practice question? Because this article on the Hindu makes a reference to the IIP. Let us try and understand what are these options. When we look into the first option, it says it is calculated and published by the Central Statistical Organization. This is right, but this is not published every 3 months. Instead, it is published every month. So the first option is wrong. When you look into the second option, the CSO has revised the base year of the IIP from 2012 to 2016. This once again is a wrong statement. Why? That is because the base year is 2011 and 12 and the previous base year was 2004 and 5. So if we have to consider the base year for the IIP in the present situation, it is 2011 and 12 and not 2016, which is why the second option is also wrong, and that is why the answer to this would be none. If we are speaking about the index of industrial production, what is it? It indicates the performance of various industrial sectors of the Indian economy. Which are these industrial sectors? It can be broadly categorized as broad sectors or the used based sectors. The broad sectors basically include manufacturing, mining and electricity. Then we have the used based sectors like capital goods, basic goods, intermediate goods, infrastructure goods, consumer durables and consumer non-durables, and it has 8 core sectors which includes electricity, steel, refinery products, crude oil, coal, cement, natural gas and fertilizers. And ultimately, when this data is given by the CSO, this will be used by the government agencies and departments such as the finance ministry and the RBI for policy making. Also remember, it is the only measure of physical volume of production when it comes to India. Now let's look into the next practice question. Which amongst the following statements is the best description of exercise Milan? Naval exercise in the Indo-Pacific region by India, Japan and USA. India, Thailand and Singapore annual trilateral exercise. Naval exercise between India and Oman. Multilateral naval exercise hosted by the Indian Navy. Which of them is the best description of exercise Milan? The answer to this is multilateral naval exercise which is hosted by the Indian Navy. Why have we taken this practice question? Because this article on the Hindu makes a reference to exercise Milan. The exercise Milan happens to be a multilateral naval exercise which is hosted by the Indian Navy, and this exercise initially started back in the year 1995 and is held biennially, and it brings together navies of multiple countries in and around the region. So this was being conducted in Andaman and Nicobar Island, but of late it is also being shifted to Vishakhapatnam. That is because it provides much better infrastructure. It also has much better sea space for the conduction of this exercise. The theme for the year 2022 happens to be camaraderie, cohesion and collaboration. Now let's look into the next practice question. River Sal flows through the state of Sikkim, Manipur, Goa, Tripura. The answer to this is Goa. Why have we taken this practice question? Because this article on the Hindu makes a reference to the Salt River. Let us understand some of the key facts with respect to Salt River. The Salt River is a small river. It flows through the state of Goa. It drains into Arabian Sea at Betul. In the past few years, what we have seen is this particular river getting polluted. Why? That is because of excessive urbanization, encroachment, deforestation and wastage that is being directly dumped by the people into this river. In order to overcome this particular issue, we have the central government which has created a project for controlling the pollution in the river Sal. Under this particular project, sewage treatment plants will be constructed by the central government, and this particular project will ultimately reduce the pollution in the river, improve the water quality, besides improving the environment as well as the sanitation in and around this particular river. Now let's look into the next practice question. In the context of India's preparation for climate smart agriculture, consider the following statements. The climate smart village approach in India is a part of project led by Climate Change, Agriculture and Food Security, an international research program. The project of CCAFS is carried out under Consultative Group on International Agriculture Research, headquartered in France. The International Crops Research Institute for the Semi-Arid Tropics in India is one of the CJIR's research centers. Which of the statements given above is or correct? The answer to this is 1, 2 and 3. This happens to be a previous year question from the year 2021. So what is this climate smart village? This happens to be a model that is developed by Climate Change, Agriculture and Food Security, which is an international research program. According to it, there are some of the global knowledge with respect to the climate action. Such models will be taken up, distributed to multiple other areas so that farmers could cultivate crops on a sustainable basis. So basically, in the climate smart village approaches, you have the farmers, the researchers, the scientific community all come together, and different agricultural practices will be tested. The best will be extracted. The same is exported to multiple other countries. The project of CCAFS is carried out under the Consultative Group of International Agriculture Research, headquartered in France. This is right statement, and the third statement is also right. Now let's look into the fact of the day. The fact of the day for today's discussion is World Press Freedom Index. What is this World Press Freedom Index? This happens to be an index which is published every year by the Reporters Without Borders. The first time this report came into limelight was in the year 2002. So remember, This is a report published by Reporters Without Borders, which happens to be a non-governmental organization. This index has about 180 countries. It also has ranking that is accorded to a particular country. How is this ranking accorded? Basically, according to this particular index, it has its arguments based on three important parameters. What are these three important parameters? Pluralism of the press, independence of the press, and legislative framework. What is this pluralism of the press? We have different types of ideology: the left leaning ideology, the right leaning ideology, or it might be the centric ideology as well. So you also have political parties who also have their own ideologies. So we have the press, the media. Do they have affiliation to just one particular ideology, or they have a various set of ideologies, is what is called as pluralism of the press. So basically, they should not have ideology that is tilted always towards one particular political party and their ideology, but instead we need to have all types of ideology. And if such press is present in a particular country, it means there is pluralism of the press. There is left leaning, there is right leaning, there is centric ideology, everyone are present. So it means there is pluralistic viewpoint when it comes to the ideology of the press. Then what we have is the independence of the press, which basically examines whether a country's press is stopped from reporting the truth. This has a direct link to also to the legislative framework. What is this legislative framework? Are there any laws in that country? Are there any constitutional principles in that country which does not allow the press or the media to report a particular information? Are there restrictions to the press, to the media to report one of the information? Ultimately, we know for the fact that media is the fourth pillar of the democracy. They have to give information. People also have the right to know the information, but this is barred under law or by a constitutional principle or by that particular political party. It means there is restriction imposed by the legislative framework. So if there is legislative framework which bars them from reporting the exact news information, it means that particular country might have issues when it comes to reporting. So if they're not able to report, it ultimately means the independence of the press is also taken away by the legislative framework. So the World Press Freedom Index takes into picture all these principles, and ultimately out of 180 countries, it also gives ranking to all these countries as per the pluralism, the independence, and legislative framework. How does this process work? Basically, you have the Reporters Without Border, which will send journalists across the world the questions. These questions will be on the basis of aspects of pluralism, media independence, overall environment in the country, laws and legislative framework that help or hurt the press, how transparent the press and its activities are in a country, and the quality of infrastructure used by the press in the country. So these questionnaires on all these important principles will be sent to the journalist. The journalist would be asked to give a particular ranking to these questions, and there are also questions which ask whether that particular principle has been upheld or not. So yes or no type of questions are also given, and ultimately on the basis of this particular criteria and ranking given by the journalist, what they prepare is an index which helps us understand if journalistic freedom is upholded in that particular country. So basically, it does not rank the public policies, so it only checks whether the journalists have the freedom in that particular country or not, and it is not an indicator of the quality of journalism. It only looks into whether the journalists have the freedom to report what they see in that country, and it is not about the quality of journalism. In addition to the questionnaire, the index also takes into account the violence against the journalists in the country under evaluation, and finally, the index gives importance to the amount of time a journalist has remained in the prison. The score calculated on this particular principle is called as SCOB. So the country that receives the lowest score overall is ranked 1. Why are we discussing about the Press Freedom Index? Because this article on the Hindu makes a reference to the Press Freedom Index. It is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. So this is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.